In this video, I'm going to go through the solutions to my 2025 AQA Paper 1 Foundation practice paper. Before watching this video, I would highly recommend that you download a copy of the paper and try it yourself. You can get a free copy from my website, and there's also a link in this video's description. Just before I run through the answers, a brief disclaimer. This paper is made using some of the most frequently occurring topics from past papers, but it should not be considered a predicted paper. Nobody can predict what's going to come up in your exams. If you see creators going on about how accurate their predictions were last year, then this is simply them trying to get you to pay for their paper. You should make use of past papers and practice papers to support your revision, but if you truly want to succeed in maths, then you need to prepare for all topics. You don't need to spend any money to do this either. There are plenty of free videos, papers, and booklets on the internet that you can make use of. In the first part of this question, we need to write 35% as a decimal. To convert any percentage into a decimal, we just divide it by 100. So we need to do 35 divided by 100, which is 0.35. So that's the answer to the question. In the second part, we need to write 0.7 as a fraction. If we take the number 0.7, the 0 here is in the units column, and the 7 is in the tenths column. So this number has 7 tenths, which is precisely what we write as the answer. 7 tenths. In the final part of the question, we need to write 3/4 as a percentage. If we take this bar here, which represents 100%, and we split it into 4 equal-sized pieces, each would be 25%, because 100 divided by 4 is 25. Now, each of these pieces is also 1/4 of the bar, since there are 4 equal-sized pieces. So for 3/4, we would want 3 of these. And if you take 25% and add a second 25%, you get 50%. And if you add a third 25%, you get 75%. So the answer to this question is 75%. In this question, we need to write 3/12 in simplest form. To do this, we'll take 3/12 and we'll try and think of a number that goes into both 3 and 12, and that number would be 3. So we can divide both 3 and 12 by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 3/12 is the same as 1/4. And we can't simplify this one any further, so the answer is 1/4. In the first part of this question, we're looking for a number in the list that is a multiple of 20. The multiples of 20 are the numbers in the 20 times table, so 20, 40, 60, 80, and so on. Looking at this list, the only number that's in the 20 times table is the number 40. For the second part, we need to write down a number from the list that is a factor of 20. The factors of 20 are the numbers that divide into 20. We can find these by thinking of pairs of numbers that multiply to make 20. So, 1 times 20 is 20, so 1 and 20 are both factors. 2 times 10 is also 20, and so is 4 times 5. So these are the factors of 20. Which one is in our list? Well, that's the number 10. In the third part, we need to find a number from the list that's a prime number. Prime numbers are numbers that have exactly 2 factors. So these are the first few prime numbers. For example, 2 is a prime number because the factors of 2 are 1 and 2. 3 is a prime number because the factors of 3 are 1 and 3. So which number in our list is a prime number? Well, that's the number 3. And for the final part, we're looking for a number in the list that is a cube number. We can get cube numbers by doing 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1, but 1 is not in the list, so we can't use that one. And then 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8, and 8 is in the list, so that is our cube number. In this question, we have 2 calculations, and we've been told that calculation A is less than calculation B, and we need to work out how much less. So let's work out the 2 calculations first. We'll start with calculation A, 845, divide by 5, and we'll do that using a bus stop like this. So first of all, we say how many 5s go into 8, which is 1, remainder 3. Then how many 5s go into 34, which is 6, remainder 4. And then how many 5s into 45, which is 9. So the answer to calculation A is 169. Now let's do calculation B, 14 times 13. To do this, I'm going to start with 3 times 4, which is 12. Then 3 times 1, which is 3, but I need to add this extra 1 at the bottom, so 4. Then we'll multiply with the 1, but this 1 is not really a 1, it represents 110, so we're going to need to put down a 0 placeholder. We then do 1 times 4, which is 4, and 1 times 1, which is 1. To complete this calculation, we just add these 2 numbers together. We'll start on the right hand side, 2 plus 0 is 2, then 4 plus 4 is 8, and then just 1. So the answer to calculation B is 182. So you can see that calculation B is indeed bigger. The question is by how much. So if we do 182 and then 169 and subtract those, we'll find the difference. To do this, we start on the right hand side and we have 2 subtract 9, which we can't do without going into negative numbers. So we move along to the 8 in the tens column. We'll cross this out, replace it with a 7, and then that 10 that we've just taken, we'll put onto the units column. So this number becomes 12. We can now do 12 subtract 9, which is 3, 7 subtract 6, which is 1, and 1 subtract 1 is 0. So the difference is 13, which is how much less calculation A is compared to calculation B. So the answer is 13. In this question, we need to use one of these symbols up here to put in each of the boxes. Let's first of all compare 5.2 and 5.15, which we can do by writing one on top of the other. If we now look at the columns starting on the left-hand side, this is the units column, so both of them have 5 units. So in that respect, they are the same number. But if we move along to the tenths column, you can see they're different. The top number has 2 tenths and the bottom one has 1 tenth. And since 2 is greater than 1, 5.2 must be greater than 5.15. Some people find it easier to fill in any blanks here with zeros to help compare these numbers by size. So, you should now be able to see that 5.20 is greater than 5.15, so we will use a greater than symbol in the box. Now let's compare 1/2 and 1/3. We'll do this by taking 2 bars like this, and we'll split the top bar into 2 equal pieces. So this part here must represent 1/2 of the bar. If we split the bottom bar into 3 equal pieces, then this part here must represent 1/3 of the bar. You can now see that 1/2 is greater than 1/3, so we would use the greater than symbol once again. In this next one, we need to do some indices. We've got 2 to the power 4, which means we need to do 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. Notice how we have 4 2's here. If we do 2 times 2, that's 4, then times 2 again, that's 8, and times 2 once more, we get 16. So 2 to the power 4 is 16. 4 squared just means 4 times 4. And 4 times 4 is also 16. So these are the same, so we can use an equal symbol. For the final one, we're going to draw a number line. We'll put 0 in the middle, and the positive numbers on the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and negative numbers on the left, so -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. If we mark on the 2 numbers from the question, -4 is here, and -2 is here. This means that -4 is less than -2 because it's to the left of it on the number line. So we would use a less than symbol. In this question, we're told the values of x and y. X is -10 and y is -2. Then we're first of all asked to work out the value of x plus 3. To do this, we take x plus 3, and then we change the x for the value we've been given, which is -10. So we just need to do -10 plus 3. We can do this with a number line as well. So start at -10, and we need to add 3, which means we need to go 3 jumps to the right. So 1, 2, 3. This would mean we end up at -7, so the answer is -7. In the next part, we need to find the value of x squared. So if we take x squared, but change this x for -10, we need to do -10 squared, which means multiply -10 by itself. When you multiply 2 negative numbers together, the result will always be positive. So we can think of this as being the same as just 10 times 10, which is 100. For the final part of the question, we have xy, which means x multiplied by y. So let's change the x for -10 and the y for -2. So we just need to multiply -10 and -2. Once again, we're multiplying 2 negative numbers together here, and when you multiply those, you get a positive result. So 10 times 2 is 20. In this question, you need to remember order of operations. We should always do multiplications before we do additions. So we're going to start by doing 2 multiplied by 4a first. 2 multiplied by 4a is 8a. So this question is just the same as 3a plus 8a. When we add 3a and 8a, we can just add the 3 and the 8 together to get 11, so we end up with 11a, which is the answer to the question. In this question, we have the heights of players from a netball team, and we need to first of all write down the modal height of the players. The modal just means the mode, which is the most frequently occurring height. Looking at these heights, they all appear once apart from the height 171, which is the height for Erica and Jessica. So the mode would be 171. For the next part of the question, we need to work out the median height. To do this, we're going to need to write the heights in order. We'll start with the smallest, which is Sandra at 164. We then have the 271s, then 172 for Rita, 173 for Mary, 182 for Tina, and then 194 for Monica. To find the height that's in the middle, we need to cross off pairs of numbers from the ends until we end up with the number in the middle. So if we cross off 194 and 164, then 182 and 171, then 173 and 171, we can see that 172 is in the middle, so that's the median height. For the final part of the question, we need to work out the range of the heights of the players. The range is the biggest take away the smallest. So the biggest height that we can see is Monica at 194, and the smallest was Sandra at 164. So we need to do 194 subtract 164. And if you do this, you'll end up with 30. So the answer is 30. In this question, we're told about Miss Harrison's class that has 30 students and Mr. Wilson's class that has 32. We're told that 80% of Miss Harrison's class passed their maths test, and 3/8 of Mr. Wilson's class passed their maths test as well. We're asked to work out how many students from both of these classes passed their maths test. We'll start with Miss Harrison's class. If there are 30 students in the class and 80% of them pass the test, we need to do 80% of 30. We can do this by finding 10% first. To find 10% of 30, divide it by 10, which will give you 3. We can then find 80% by multiplying both of these by 8. 10% multiplied by 8 is 80%, and 3 multiplied by 8 is 24. So for Miss Harrison's class, there were 24 students that passed the maths test. Now let's do Mr. Wilson's class. For this one, we need to find 3/8 of the 32 students. We'll do this by finding 1/8 first, which is 32 divided by 8, which will give you 4. And then if you've got 1/8 to get 3/8, you multiply this by 3. So 4 multiplied by 3, which is 12. So in Miss Harrison's class, there were 24 students passing the test, and in Mr. Wilson's class, there were 12. So if we take the 24 and 12, then add them together, we get the total number of students passing, which is 36, and that's the answer to the question. In this question, we have Layla who's playing a game, and we're told the probability that she wins the game is 0.95. We need to work out the probability that she does not win the game. To work out the probability that something does not happen, you do 1, subtract the probability that it does happen, which in this case is 0.95. So we just need to do 1 subtract 0.95. Let's write out a subtraction for 1 subtract 0.95. And to do this one, we'll cross out the 1, replace it with a 0, and then carry that 1 over to the next number. Then cross out this 10, make it a 9, and carry the 1 over to the next number. And now we can do the subtraction. On the right hand side, we have 10 subtract 5, which is 5, 9 subtract 9, which is 0, then a decimal point, and 0 subtract 0, which is 0. So the answer is 0.05. For this question, we need to match the calculations on the left with the answers on the right. We'll start with 1/8 plus 1/8. If you add together fractions with the same denominators, you can just add the numerators. So to get the answer, we do 1 plus 1, which is 2, and we keep the 8 on the bottom. So the answer is 2/8. But you'll notice that 2/8 isn't one of the options we can choose from. That's because 2/8 will simplify. If we take 2/8 and divide both the numerator and denominator by 2, we get 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and 8 divided by 2, which is 4. So 2/8 is the same as 1/4, and that is one of the answers we can choose from. So this one goes to 1/4. Now let's have a look at 1/8 times 1/8. If we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerators, so 1 times 1, which is 1, and then we multiply denominators, so 8 times 8, 64. So the answer is 1/64, which we can see is one of the answers. And finally, let's do 1/8 divided by 1/8. To divide fractions, we're going to change the divide to a multiply, and then take the reciprocal of the second fraction, which we can do by just switching the 8 and the 1. We can now multiply these like we multiplied fractions before. On the numerators, 1 times 8 is 8, and for the denominators, 8 times 1 is also 8. So we end up with 8/8, which means 8 divided by 8, which is 1. So the answer to this question is 1. For this question, we have a frequency tree that shows information about students and whether they wanted a maths and English revision guide. We're told that one of the students is selected at random, and we need to work out the probability that this student did not want either of the revision guides. To find the students that don't want either of the revision guides, we need to answer no to both of these questions. So that will be these 10 students down here. They said no to a maths revision guide and also no to an English one. To write this as a probability, we need to write it as a fraction of all of the students. We can see from the frequency tree that there are 105 students in total. So the probability will be 10 out of 105. For the second part of the question, we need to write a ratio. It's the ratio of those that wanted a maths revision guide to those that did not want a maths revision guide. We can see those that wanted a maths revision guide is 75, and those that did not is 30. So the ratio will just be 75 to 30. But the question does say to give the answer in simplest form. We can simplify this by dividing by 3 first of all. 75 divided by 3 is 25, and 30 divided by 3 is 10. Then we can divide these by 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5, and 10 divided by 5 is 2. So the fully simplified ratio is 5 to 2. In the final part of the question, we're told the school decides to buy revision guides for each student that wanted them. We're given the prices of the revision guides, and we're asked to work out how much it's going to cost the school in total. Let's start with the maths revision guides. We can see that the school needs to buy 75 maths revision guides for these students that wanted them, and the price for one is £3. So we need to multiply 75 by 3. To do this, we do 3 times 5, which is 15, and then 3 times 7, which is 21, but add the extra 1 will give you 22. So the answer is £225 for the maths revision guides. Now we need to do English. This is slightly more complicated. The 60 students up here said they want an English revision guide, but there's also 20 students down here. So that makes a total of 80 revision guides the school needs to buy. And they're going to cost £2.50 each. So we need to multiply 80 by £2.50. To do this, I'm going to multiply 80 by 25 first. So 80 multiplied by 25. We'll start with 5 times 0, which is 0. Then 5 times 8, which is 40. Then we move on to the 2, but that 2 represents 20, so we need to put a 0 placeholder down. We do 2 times 0, which is 0, and then 2 times 8, which is 16. Then we can just add these numbers together. 0 plus 0 is 0, and 0 plus 0 is 0 again. 4 plus 6 is 10, and then 1 plus 1 is 2. So 80 multiplied by 25 is 2,000. But remember, it was 80 multiplied by £2.50, so we actually need to divide our answer by 10 to get £200 instead. And then to finish the question and get the total cost, we'll add the £225 from the maths revision guides to the £200 from the English revision guides. 5 plus 0 is 5, 2 plus 0 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So the answer is £425. In this question, we're told about two of the angles in a quadrilateral. They are 40 degrees and 60 degrees. You should know that a quadrilateral has a total of 360 degrees. So let's add together the two angles we have, 40 and 60, which gives a total of 100. If we then subtract this 100 from 360, we get 260. So there are two more angles we don't know about, but their total must be 260 degrees. We then have some statements and we need to decide if they could be true or not. The first statement says that the other two angles are both acute angles. An acute angle is an angle that's less than 90 degrees. If you add 90 and 90 together, you get 180. So remember, we're trying to find two angles that make a total of 260. Now if the acute angles must be less than 90, and 2 90s makes 180, there's no way we can pick two of these angles to make a total of 260. So the first one cannot be true. For the second statement, it says the two angles are both obtuse angles. An obtuse angle is an angle between 90 and 180. Now this one is possible, for example, if both of them were 130. If you add those together, you get 260, which is what we're after. So this one could be true. For the next statement, the two other angles are both reflex angles. A reflex angle is an angle bigger than 180 but smaller than 360. If you add 280s together, you get 360. Now we're trying to get the total of 260. So this one's clearly not possible because this total is going to be too large. Even if we used 180 for both angles, the total is just far too big. So this one cannot be true. And there's three more statements to check. For the next one of the other two angles is acute and the other one is obtuse. Now this one's a bit tricky to spot. But if you take, for example, 85 and 175, the 85 is acute because it's smaller than 90, and the 175 is obtuse because it's between 90 and 180. If you do add these two together, you get the required total of 260, so this one could be true. For the next statement, we've got one of them being acute and one of them being reflex. This one is also possible. If you did 60 for the acute angle and 200 for the reflex, 60 plus 200 is of course 260, so this one could be true. For the final one of the angles is obtuse and the other one is reflex. Remember, obtuse angles are at least 90 degrees and reflex angles are at least 180. And if you add 90 and 180, you get 270. And remember, the obtuse angle needs to be greater than 90 and the reflex greater than 180. So when we add the two angles together, it's going to be more than 270. So we're never going to be able to get 260, so this one cannot be true. In this question, we're asked to work out the perimeter of a rectangle in inches. But notice how the lengths of the rectangle are not given in inches, they're given in centimeters. We have, however, been given a conversion. We've been told to use 1 inch is equal to 2.5 centimeters. So let's write out this conversion and try and work out how we can convert the 5 and 15 centimeters into inches. Well, if we write the 5 centimeters underneath the 2.5 centimeters, you should be able to see that if we double 2.5, we get 5. So if we double the 1 inch, we get 2 inches. So 2 inches is just the same as 5 centimeters. But what about the 15 centimeters? Well, if you multiply 5 by 3, you get 15. So if we multiply 2 inches by 3, we get 6 inches. So we know that 6 inches is 15 centimeters, so we can add this onto our diagram, and we also know that 2 inches is 5 centimeters, so we can add this onto the diagram as well. Now, to work out the perimeter of a rectangle, you need the lengths of all 4 of the sides. So the side at the bottom is the same as the side at the top, so also 6 inches, and the one on the left is the same as the one on the right, so also 2 inches. So to work out the perimeter, we just need to add all of these lengths together. 6 inches plus 2 inches plus 6 inches plus 2 inches gives you a total of 16 inches. So the answer is 16. In the second part of the question, we've been told that in fact 1 inch is the same as 2.54 centimeters, not 2.5 centimeters like in the previous part. We need to answer the question, what does this mean about the perimeter of the rectangle in inches? Well, remember in the previous part, this 5 centimeter line here was 2 inches. If we instead use this conversion to work out 2 inches, then 1 inch multiplied by 2 will give you 2 inches, which means we need to double 2.54, which will give you 5.08. This means that with the new conversion, 2 inches will no longer be 5 centimeters, 2 inches will be 5.08 centimeters. This means that when we convert the 5 centimeters into inches, like we did in the previous part of the question, we'll end up with slightly fewer inches. Because if 5.08 centimeters is the same as 2 inches, then 5 centimeters must be slightly less than 2 inches. This will mean that all of the lengths of the rectangle will be slightly lower than they were in the previous part. So the answer is, the third one, it will be less than the answer to part A. In this question, we're told a lap of an athletics track is 400 meters long. Keely is going to run laps of the track until she's run a total of 4 kilometers. The first thing we need to do in this question is convert that 4 kilometers into meters. You should know that 1 kilometer is the same as 1,000 meters. So for 4 kilometers, we need to multiply 1 kilometer by 4. And if we do 1,000 meters times 4, we get 4,000 meters. So instead of running 4 kilometers, we can think of her as running 4,000 meters. We can now work out how many laps of the track she's going to do. Since she's going to run 4,000 meters, and each lap is 400 meters, we can divide 4,000 by 400 to get 10. So she must be doing 10 laps. We're trying to work out how long it's going to take her to run this distance. And we're told how long it takes her to run each lap, that's 80 seconds. So if she's doing 10 laps that take 80 seconds in total, we can do 80 times 10 to get a total time of 800. So we know it will take her 800 seconds, but the question says to give your answer in minutes and seconds. You should know that 1 minute is the same as 60 seconds. If we multiply both of these by 10, we find that 10 minutes is the same as 600 seconds. Now we're trying to get to 800 seconds and 600 isn't too far away. If we add on another minute here to get 11 minutes, we need to add on another 60 seconds, so that'll be 660. Another minute would be 12 minutes, and another 60 would be 720. Another minute would be 13 minutes, and another 60 gives you 780. So we're now very close to 800. We can't add on another 60 or we'll go past it. So the answer must be 13 minutes, but how many more seconds do we need to get from 780 to 800? Well, that's just 20 more. So it's 13 minutes and 20 seconds. In the second part of the question, we're asked to work out Keely's average speed in meters per second. We'll do this using the formula average speed equals distance divided by time. We're given both of those values in the question. The distance for a lap is 400 meters, and the time she takes for a lap is 80 seconds. So we just need to do 400 divided by 80. You can simplify this fraction by dividing both of these by 10. 400 divided by 10 is 40, and 80 divided by 10 is 8. So we need to do 40 divided by 8, which is 5. In this question, we need to solve this inequality. We'll start by subtracting 4 from both sides. On the left-hand side, the 4's will cancel, so we just have 2x. And on the right-hand side, negative 2 subtract 4 is negative 6. Then we can divide both sides by 2. On the left-hand side, 2x divided by 2 is 1x, and on the right-hand side, negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So this is the solution, x is greater than negative 3. For the second part of the question, we need to represent the previous part's answer on this number line below. So that's this inequality here. We start by drawing a circle at the number in that inequality, negative 3. We then need to decide if we're going to leave this circle open or shade it in. Since the symbol is a greater than, we will leave it open. Had it been greater than or equal to, we would have done a shaded circle instead. Then we need to draw an arrow to represent the direction of the numbers that are greater than negative 3. This would be to the right, since all of these numbers here are greater than negative 3. For example, 1 is greater than negative 3. In this question, we need to find the nth term of this sequence. We'll start by working out the difference between each of the terms. To get from one term to the next in this sequence, you always add on 0.5. This means the nth term will start with 0.5n. Then we need to write out the multiples of 0.5, so 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and so on. Then we just work out how to get from the multiples of 0.5 to our sequence. For the first term here, we would need to add on 1.5. And that's the same for the next one. And in fact, that's the same for all of them. So we take 0.5n, and then we just add on 1.5 to get our sequence. So the nth term is 0.5n plus 1.5. In this question, we have two numbers given in standard form, and we need to add them together. We'll start with this number here, 5.2 times 10 to the power 3, and we'll try and convert it to an ordinary number. Since we're multiplying by 10 to the power 3, that's like multiplying by 10 3 times. So let's multiply 5.2 by 10 3 times. If we multiply it by 10 once, we'll get 52. If we multiply it by 10 a second time, we'll get 520, and a third time will be 5,200. So this is 5.2 times 10 to the power 3. Now we'll look at 2 times 10 to the power negative 2. Since we're multiplying by 10 to the power negative 2, this actually means we need to divide it by 10 2 times. So we're going to divide 2 by 10 twice. 2 divided by 10 once would be 0.2, and then if you divide it by 10 a second time, you'll get 0.02. So 2 times 10 to the power negative 2 is 0.02. Now in the question, we're adding these together, so we just need to add these numbers together, which would be 5,200.02. And that's the answer to the question. In this question, we have the ratio square root 100 to square root 16. The square root of 100 is 10, since 10 times 10 is 100. The square root of 16 is 4, since 4 times 4 is 16. So the ratio is really just 10 to 4. We need to write this ratio in the form n to 1. That means a ratio where the first number is n, which we need to work out, and the second one must be 1. So this 4 is going to turn into a 1. How would we get from 4 to 1? Well, that's divide by 4. So we must also divide this 10 by 4. To divide 10 by 4, you can half it and half it again. Half of 10 is 5, and half of 5 is 2.5. So this number must be 2.5. So the ratio is 2.5 to 1. Ordinarily, we wouldn't put decimals in ratios, but because this question asks us for the form n to 1, we're allowed to use a decimal. In this question, we need to work out the volume of a prism. This is actually a formula from your formula sheet. It will say the volume of a prism is the area of the cross-section multiplied by the length. So we need to start with the area of the cross-section. We're told in the question the cross-section of this is a right-angled triangle. So let's find the area of this right-angled triangle. To do that, we do 1/2 multiplied by the base, which is 3, multiplied by the perpendicular height, which is 4. To work this out, we'll start with 3 times 4, which is 12, and then do a half of this. Half of 12 is 6, so the area of the triangle is 6 centimeters squared. The formula then says we need to multiply this by the length. The length of this prism is 7.5. So we take this 6 and multiply it by 7.5. To work this out, I would do 75 multiplied by 6 instead. 6 5s are 30, and then 6 7s are 42, and if we add this 3, we get 45. So 75 multiplied by 6 is 450. But we want 7.5 multiplied by 6, which is 10 times smaller, so it will be 45. And that's the answer to the question. In this question, we're told about the mass of a banana, which is 120 grams to the nearest 10 grams, and we need to work out an error interval. To do this, I draw a number line and place the number from the question, 120 grams, in the middle. We then need to consider what it could have rounded to the nearest 10 grams above and below this number. To the nearest 10 grams below, that would be 110. The nearest 10 grams above would be 130. We find the bounds of the error interval then by finding the points halfway in between these numbers. Halfway in between 110 and 120 is 115, and halfway in between 120 and 130 is 125. So these numbers form the bounds of the error interval, 115 and 125. For this question, we're going to express the area of circle A as a percentage of the area of circle B. So let's just work out the area of each of the circles first. To work out the area of a circle, you use pi times r squared, where r is the radius. The radius of the first circle is 3 centimeters, so we would do pi times 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, so if you do pi times 9, you get 9 pi. For the second circle, we've been given the diameter at 10, but the radius will be half of this, which is 5. So for this circle, we do pi times 5 squared. 5 squared is 25, and pi times 25 is 25 pi. Now, to express the area of circle A as a percentage of the area of circle B, we're first of all going to write it as a fraction. So circle A's area as a fraction of circle B's area, which would be 9 pi over 25 pi. Here the pi's will cancel, so it's just 9 over 25, and now we want to convert this to a percentage. I know that 25 goes into 100 4 times, so if I multiply it by 4, I get 100. If I then multiply the 9 on the top by 4, I get 36. So these two fractions are equivalent. 36 over 100 is just the same as 36%, so the answer must be 36%. In this question, we have Peter, Ray, and Winston that are going to share some money. We're told that Peter has 40% of the money. So if we start with 100% and subtract Peter's share of 40%, we find there's 60% left over for Ray and Winston. Ray and Winston share this money in the ratio 1 to 3. So let's write out a ratio table for 1 to 3 for Ray and Winston, and include a total column. The total number of parts here is 4, since if we add 1 and 3 together we get 4. The 60% that they have represents their total share of the money, so we'll write 60% underneath this 4 parts. Then we need to consider how we get from 4 to 60. That would be multiplied by 15. So we can also multiply the 1 and 3 parts by 15. 1 15 is 15, and 3 15s is 45. So we find that Ray receives 15% and Winston receives 45%. The question asks us to work out the ratio of Peter's money to Ray's money to Winston's money. So let's write out P to R to W. We were told that Peter receives 40% of the money, and we just worked out that Ray receives 15 and Winston receives 45. To write this as a ratio, we don't need a percentage sign, so it must be 40 to 15 to 45. The question does say to give this in its simplest form though, so we're going to need to simplify this. We can divide them all by 5. 40 divided by 5 is 8, 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 45 divided by 5 is 9. So the ratio is 8 to 3 to 9. In this question, Lydia is going to pour a drink from the full bottle to fill 7 of the empty cups, and we need to work out how much drink is left in the bottle. So let's start by working out the capacity of 7 of the empty cups. Each empty cup has 1/4 of a litre, and we're going to fill 7 of them, so we can multiply this by 7. To multiply these, we'll rewrite the 7 as 7 over 1, and then multiply 1 and 7 to get 7, and 4 and 1 to get 4. So the amount of drink needed to fill 7 of these cups is 7 quarters. The bottle starts off being full with a capacity of 2 1/3 litres, but we're going to pour out 7 quarters of a litre to fill up the empty cups, so we need to subtract 7 quarters from this. To do this, we'll convert the mixed number 2 1/3 into an improper fraction. We can do this by multiplying 2 and 3, which is 6, and then adding 1, which is 7, so 2 1/3 is the same as 7 thirds. And then we need to subtract 7 quarters from this. These two fractions have different denominators, which means we can't subtract them straight away. We need to convert them to have the same denominator. The lowest common multiple of 3 and 4 is 12, so we can rewrite both of these as something over 12. To get from 3 to 12, we would multiply by 4, so we would multiply the 7 on the top by 4 as well. 7 fours are 28. So 7 thirds is the same as 28 twelfths. For the second fraction, to get from 4 to 12, you multiply by 3, so 7 times 3 is 21. So 7 quarters is the same as 21 twelfths. We can now subtract them because they both have the same denominator of 12. To do this, we do 28 subtract 21, which is 7, and the denominator stays at 12. So the answer to this question is 7 twelfths. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you found it useful. Check out the one I think you should watch next, subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos, and I'd really appreciate if you would like, comment, or share this video with your friends.